Welcome to this step-by-step guide on how to actually buy and store and secure your Bitcoin and indeed other crypto assets. Now, if you're new into this space, into the world of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, well, this video will certainly help you understand the safest ways to actually conduct those purchases and protect your Bitcoin holdings. So let's get started. So Bitcoin is unlike any traditional money. It's decentralized, meaning no government or bank can freeze your funds. However, this also means you're responsible for keeping it safe. Now, if you lose access or even get scammed, there's no customer support to help you. In this guide, we'll make sure you stay protected. Now, the first step is buying Bitcoin. For beginners, I encourage you to use platforms, centralized exchange platforms like Coinbase or even crypto.com, particularly those that are actually authorized and approved by your local jurisdictional financial regulator. Now, this aspect is particularly important for those beginner crypto investors because they will give you guarantees, similar to guarantees that you would have in your bank accounts. That's quite key. So that's the first step. Also, in addition to worrying about where to set up your wallet in these centralized exchange platforms, you also need to take into consideration, well, how often would I like to build up my crypto portfolio on those exchanges? Well, there is a recommendation on dollar cost average. Now, what is dollar cost average? It means it would enable investors to buy small amounts, fractional amounts of crypto tokens, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, or any others, to make those acquisitions over time. Now, this helps to reduce risk from price swings because at the end of the day, we're not professional traders. We are not into the business of knowing the timeliness of when we should go into the market and make those crypto purchases. So dollar cost average or euro cost average, pound cost average, it doesn't matter which fiat currency you use in order to make those purchases, is always the best advice to use cost averaging in order to make those small purchases over time. That is the most effective strategy. And it's not just me saying it, there are other leading investors that actually advocate the same approach. Now, most importantly, you should never leave large amounts of your Bitcoin or other crypto asset holdings on any centralized exchange platforms. It's always recommended that you should withdraw the majority of your holdings from these centralized exchange platforms into a secure wallet. In this case, a cold or hardware wallet, which I'll touch on next. Now, let's take the example that you've already set up your crypto wallet on a centralized exchange platform and you've already made some purchase of, let's say, Bitcoin. Now you need to secure the place to store it. Hot wallets like Blue Wallet or Muum are pretty much good for daily use, but they're still connected to the internet, which makes them vulnerable. For long-term security, however, hardware wallets like Ledger and Trezor are the best. Now, I actually own both of them, and you can see it here. This is white one is Trezor. It's only cost me 40 euros, and I have a Ledger device. This is a Nano X Ledger device, and between both, and I'm actually a user of both, they're very, very secure. You may want to look into other hardware wallet vendors, but for me, Ledger and Trezor are the best. For advanced users, you may want to even consider the option of using paper wallets, but they actually require extra care and diligence. For me, bottom line, the best way to actually store the majority of your holdings, which is step 2 here, you should consider using a hardware wallet, a cold wallet for storage. But of course, that comes with additional responsibilities, which I'll touch on next. Now, let's say you've actually set up your crypto wallet to hold your Bitcoin holdings on that hardware cold wallet device. You need to then worry about downloading the official sources of the software app that will help you to manage the Ledger device or the Trezor device via the software apps, which you can easily install both on your laptop or on your mobile device, right? I use actually the both versions to manage the holdings through each of these two devices. Now, when you actually set up your wallet on your cold hardware wallet store, you need to set up either a 12 or a 24 word recovery phrase. And you need to write this down. And very, very importantly, it's not just a question of writing it down on a piece of paper. For heaven's sake, don't do that. You need to write it down and store it. My advice would be in two ways, or at least consider these two options to keeping the 12 or 24 word recovery phrase. You can either use a password vault. In my case, I use NordPass, but there are other leading software vendors that will take care of holding all of your critical and highly sensitive passwords on the software or the virtual password vault. And also, in my case, I've actually included this sensitive information in my will and testament. Now, not many people have actually thought this through, but depending on where you are in the world, in the case I live in Spain, and I can say they take the seriousness of your safeguarding confidentiality on the content of your will and testament, because there is a national legislation that guarantees that only you and your beneficiaries will ever have access to the contents of your will and testament. I've just recently set up my will and testament in the country. Now, they've actually advised me, and I've actually corroborated this fact through the notary where I've deposited my will and testament, where they've confirmed that while I'm still alive, I am the only person who will have access to that will and testament. Upon death, the beneficiaries will obviously at that point, and only then, will have access to the will and testament document, which I've actually included critical sensitive information, but particularly my 24 word recovery phrase on that. So between the two options that I keep are in the will and testament document, because it's a highly confidential protocol which is governed by national legislation, which gives me that assurance that I need, and also on the password vault manager, in this case NordPass, where I've actually held this information. This is very important, and either of these two options, or you can indeed investigate other options if you like, or even back up in a secure off-site location for which you and perhaps a third person that you have high confidence and trust in, that could be another option. There are also other options like multi-sig and collaborative security, which I'll touch on next. These are more advanced features on how you can manage and safeguard these critical pieces of information. The bottom line is you should never share it with anyone. And what I also do in the apps that I install, I use crypto.com because it's an endorsed centralized crypto exchange in the country by the financial regulator. Like I said, this is the first step, but the second step is to move the majority of your holdings to your cold hardware wallet. Now you need to enable two-factor authentication for extra security, and you should always test small amounts of transfer from your centralized exchange to your designated cold hardware wallet before actually moving lump sums amounts. Now I've actually done this myself, and it's worked very beautifully. If I were to do it all in one go, it is a risk, and particularly because the crypto exchanges have their set of your crypto holding addresses, which are very, very long numerical values. And not only that, you'll be given a separate set of crypto wallet addresses on your hardware holder. So the two are going to be different. And in order to mitigate any issues, and more importantly, loss of cryptos during the transfer from one address onto another, you should always start out with very, very small amounts. And don't worry about the fees. I think it's more than justified nowadays. The fees that we're talking about, depending on the exchange that you use and the network for transferring these amounts. And let's take the example of Bitcoin. I use the Bitcoin base layer to manage these transfers rather than the layer 2 like Lightning. I haven't actually tested that, but there is that cheaper option transfer if you'd want, but you need to do your own investigation. Nevertheless, is always, as I said here, is very, very advisable, strongly advisable in fact, that you should try small amounts of transfers between these two sets of crypto wallet addresses, just to make sure that the transfer of your Bitcoin holdings, as an example, has arrived correctly on your cold hardware wallet store. And then only then you should make a second transfer, or even a third or a fourth of the rest of your transfer that you had in mind. So that is an important advice. Now moving on to step 4, how to store Bitcoin securely or other crypto assets securely. You should never, ever hold large amounts on centralized exchange platforms. It's always sound advice that you should keep very small amounts on your crypto holdings on such centralized exchange platforms like crypto.com, Binance, or even Coinbase for your day-to-day crypto investments. That's what I usually do. I keep very, very small, maybe just a matter of a few €1,000, or it could be up to 10,000, no matter what amount. It should be nevertheless an amount that is small enough to cater for your day-to-day crypto investment purchases or even divestments when you want to sell off your crypto holdings. And then you should offload the majority of your crypto asset holdings definitely onto the cold hardware wallet store. So that's the first point. And like I said, on the second point, use your hardware wallet for that long-term storage, but it comes with that responsibility, which is outlined here and also mentioned earlier on. Keeping multiple backups of your recovery phrase in those off-site locations, and also consider using multi-signature wallets for additional security. Now, this last point I haven't actually used because it's still in its infancy. I know there's various vendors out there like the Bitcoin Advisor. You may want to look into that, but nevertheless, anyone can start using cold hardware wallet stores for that long-term storage, because ultimately it is the best way to secure your holdings in the long term, but it comes with that responsibility. And there's various ways to mitigate that responsibility in the case things were go wrong, because at the end of the day, if you lose your recovery phrase, no keys, no cryptos, right? So that is the point, and you need to really have confidential means to make secure backup copies of your recovery phrase in different places. In my case, as I said, I use the password vault and the will and testament held in a local notary. Between the two, for me at this moment in time, it's enough. And I can certainly tell you that after having gone through this, I can sleep well at night. And that's the point. Now, how do you actually protect against scams and threats? Now, we are all faced with scams. There are different forms of scams out there, and it's everywhere and it's upon us. It's part of our day-to-day. So you should always double check website links to avoid phishing attacks. That's why I always recommend always keep your hardware wallet software up to date, and always use the software vendor websites to download updates. And there's two types of updates, just for your information. There is a software update for the apps, and not only that, when you start using your Ledger or your Trezor hardware wallets, they also have firmware updates embedded within those devices. They occur every now and again, and it's always sound advice that you should only use, and I can't stress this enough, the vendor website to download both types of updates. Updates to your mobile app and your desktop application, as well as the firmware, which are software operating systems, if you like, held in each of those cold hardware wallet stores. So that is very important to keep it up to date. And by doing that, you'll be in a very good position to protect yourself against possible scams that could happen, right? And really forget about any phishing attempts. Don't hit any links, please, in your emails. Nothing like that. Now, what are the advanced security tips? Things like using passphrase for extra protection on hardware wallets. Now, I've actually tested this out, and it's just treat it as if it's another password. They certainly do offer that extra protection over and above the 24-word recovery phrase. I have set up passphrase for these two devices. So when you want to, let's say, restore your hardware wallet holdings, crypto holdings, onto another device because you may have lost your Trezor or your Ledger hardware wallets, and you need to purchase another one in order to recover your holdings onto a brand new device. Well, there's various means to do that. You can use the 24-word recovery phrase on the new purchased device. But not only that, I also use passphrase, because by adding another password, which is just a simple password, that is what is called password phrase, it gives you that extra protection. So when you have both the recovery phrase and the passphrase set up on your cold hardware wallet store, you need to use both in order to access the crypto holdings. it just gives you that extra comfort that your crypto holdings are well looked after, and only you will be able to have access to those holdings and not by anybody else. So that's the point and the message. Now, there are some other comments here in the case of Bitcoin, running your own Bitcoin node for full sovereignty. The Bitcoin node is really there just to be part of the Bitcoin network, to validate transactions, and also to be part of the consensus mechanisms for whenever there are new updates or hard fork updates into the Bitcoin network protocol. Being part of the node, you'd be able to have that possibility to be able to reach a broader consensus for whenever these changes happen at a grand scale across the network, you'll be able to participate. And by doing that, you need to have set up your own Bitcoin node to be part of the Bitcoin network ecosystem. So that's just really a point for those advanced users, for those Bitcoin enthusiast users that want to actually have full sovereignty and control by having a separate node connected to the network. I haven't done that because I don't feel there's a need for me to do that right now, at least, but maybe later on I may consider to do that, in which case it's very simple to have your own Bitcoin node up and running. And I've made a point about multi-signature wallets, which are like multi-chain approvals whenever you're engaged in moving transfers from one crypto wallet address into another. But like I said, it's very, very complex for my own needs, but industry leaders are advocating multi-signature wallets. So maybe it might be something of interest to you to investigate. But for me, I like to keep it simple under my strict control and not by a third-party multi-signature wallet provider. And of course, you have finally offline transactions, which provide that ultimate security. Well, that's just for your FYI to investigate. And lastly, just to wrap up this episode, by buying Bitcoin and crypto assets is very easy. But as you get into the habit of making these purchases, whether it's on a centralized exchange platform like crypto.com or Coinbase or Binance, or even using a hardware wallet like Ledger or Trezor, you rapidly come to the conclusion that securing it is essential, right? So you need to use trusted centralized exchange platforms for beginner crypto investors to start out with. But at some point, you need to think about moving the majority of your crypto holdings onto a hardware called wallet, a store. And importantly, never please share your private keys. You know, that 24-word recovery phrase. And if you decide to add a digital passphrase, the combination of which will give you that ultimate security and indeed peace of mind. Start off, as I said before, with small transactions when you're moving crypto holdings from one crypto wallet into another, just to make sure it's arrived in the other end without any problems before you actually increase the holding values in those transfers at a later stage. You need to build up your knowledge and confidence. That's the bottom line. Now, if you found this guide helpful, I'd appreciate your support in liking, subscribing to my channel, as I regularly post some interesting videos such as these, anything to do with Bitcoin, blockchain technology, and the future of finance. So I'll see you next time.